Aldous Huxley was an English writer and philosopher. He wrote nearly 50 books. And here's his quote about history. That men do not learn very much from the lessons of history is the most important of all the lessons of history. Welcome to the History Slices podcast, a mother-son duo discussing awesome bits of history. We prove on every show that history is not boring, entertaining, yet stimulating. This is History Slices. And now, here's your hosts, Jacob and Rachel.
Jacob.
Hey, Mom.
I'm excited to get into this topic today.
Yes, I know this about you.
Yeah. I actually brought, well, it's not a surprise to you, but I brought to the conversation today a little surprise for the audience in the way of some music. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to that. We'll get to that when we get to it. So today we're talking about bullfighting. It's not as common here in the States, which is one of the reasons I want to talk about it. Also, it has like some interesting historical relevancy, I suppose.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
If that's the right word for it.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So it's a sport. It involves a bullfighter. There's horses. Sometimes the bullfighter's on a horse, sometimes not. It depends on kind of the style of bullfighting. And they're trying to subdue and immobilize / kill a bull. Again, there's different rules and guidelines, if we're talking about Spanish style or Portugal style or whatever. I think it's also a little more common in Mexico than in the States.
It would be interesting to see the differences between, the different styles to be able to watch that.
A lot of kinds of Latin countries, if that's the right word for it, have bullfighting in some fashion. And we're going to be talking about Spanish style because that's arguably the more well-known, at least in North America. It's common in Spain, obviously, but it's also can be found in southern France, Portugal, Colombia, Mexico, Peru, Venezuela, and Ecuador. So,
oh, wow. That Spanish style can be found in all those different places?
Yeah. So it's like I said, a lot of Latin-based countries. And
I'm kind of surprised about the France thing because I thought it was more a Spanish language kind of a sport.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those that are next to each other.
Right.
There's some
neighbors,
cross-cultural pollination, I think. Almost said pollution, and that would have been a native connotation there. So basically, in Spanish style, the bulls they're raised free range. They're bred for aggression, to have like a temper and to charge and stuff. Like I said, Portugal is a little different. In America, in the U.S., it's often combined with rodeo, which is a whole nother topic.
So is there actually bullfighting that goes into, like, in America, that goes on in America?
Yeah, but I think it's a little different.
Okay.
There's like some legalities and stuff, and I don't think it's as popular.
Okay. That's really interesting, though, to know. And I could see how that would be sort of coupled with rodeo. Like, yeah.
For those who don't know, rodeo is basically cowboy stuff. I have a whole episode about rodeo, but it's like a fairground cowboy clown
roping
thing.
And like cowboy skills.
It's like one of those southern United States kind of culture stuff. I mean, I'm sort of found elsewhere.
It is. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Very interesting.
I associate it with like Texas.
Yeah. And we could see it here too in the Pacific Northwest, and they travel.
Oh yeah.
For the rodeo, the cowboys and the contestants, whatever, travel for that. But I didn't really imagine that there were bullfights here. And I can see how they would be different because I don't really see the authorities or whatever here allowing us to kill a bull.
That's the main different thing.
Into the sport. Yeah.
Yeah, with rodeos, bull riding is more common than bullfighting.
Right.
And if you don't know what bull riding is, it's basically trying to stay on top of a bull for as long as possible. There are mechanical versions at fairgrounds that are really fun. Yeah. It's a very, I think, American thing. But maybe it's also in Europe. I don't know. That
would be so scary to be on top of an actual bull who you can hardly hold on to. When you get flipped off, then you're not on your feet. And there's a bull with big horns there. That would be terrifying.
Yeah. Well, that's how we do it here, I guess. Now, due to bullfights usually happening in late afternoon, I'm sure there's, differences based on weather or time of year or whatever. The cheaper seats are more out exposed in the sun, while the more expensive, higher class seats are more in the shade. Back in the day, I don't know if it's still if they still do it like this. But back, because I'm not in Spain, but back in the day, royalty and like nobles and stuff like that, they'd always be in like the seedy parts because that's like the upper class pos.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I have a question for you. You might know this. Is Spain a particularly like humid country?
I wouldn't consider it humid. I consider it more dry and more arid. Although it has different climate zones.
Of course, yeah.
And I think, and this is really just me going off of, so I could be wrong. So listeners, if I'm wrong, just correct me. Shoot me an email, info@historyslices.com. I think like Madrid, obviously the big cities are places where you'd see the big bullfights, Madrid, Barcelona, Seville, maybe, the bigger cities, and smaller towns would have, they might have a version of the bullfight, or they might have, different events around bullfights. I remember going to one in particular when I was younger. It was like a bullfighting ring where they were trained, or where just Joe off the street could come in, or Jose off the street could come in and, get in the ring with a small bull just for the excitement of it, but not like what I'm guessing you're going to be talking about, which is the big arena and all that. Those would be the bigger cities. So it would be hot. And I believe that they're usually afternoon, like you said. I don't know that they have many other time of day, but so when the sun is really
like at the peak
felt. Yeah. So hot. Yeah. You see a lot of fans, people fanning themselves.
Yeah. The bullfight itself, it tends to last 20 minutes, about, give or take.
Wow.
I know, right?
It seems like it's a lot longer than that.
It starts with a band and a march parade theme. I'm not sure what the exact
like a
term
procession.
is.
I think.
Like a procession.
Yeah.
There's a trumpeter. He sounds out. The bullfighter comes out. He's all dressed up in this crazy anachronistic 16th century outfit. It's like yellow and very colorful and stuff. Yellow isn't a color, not yellow isn't cowardly.
Yeah, and they're not always yellow. But bright.
Mm-hmm. Most of the pictures I've seen were yellow.
Oh, were they?
Yeah,
okay.
but I suppose it could probably come in other colors. But he comes out and it's kind of like he gets hyped up, like, oh my God, yeah. After a few minutes, the bull comes out. And if you know how bulls act, you can tell kind of how the fight's going to go. If it's going to be more aggressive or more kind of skittish or cautious.
Right. And I know what I remember, and I don't want to be stealing any of your thunder.
No, it's all good. Steal away.
I remember that both the bullfighter and the audience want that aggressive bull, that one who's going to give the bullfighter a run for his money, because that makes it more exciting, more bang for your buck. Basically, if you're sitting there in the audience, you get to witness, a real duel per se.
No, I get it. You don't want it to be over too quickly or to be too lame.
Yeah.
I suppose.
Too easy.
Yeah. So the thing about bullfighting is it's an ancient sport. Like, it goes back centuries. The first recorded bullfight, or at least something that resembles a bullfight, was in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Do you know what that is?
I've heard of that before, but isn't that like one of the very first ever writings? Yeah,
it's as far as it's an epic poem, and as far as early surviving texts, it's like the earliest.
Okay.
There's probably stuff before then, but it's lost to time.
Yeah.
This is like Mesopotamia stuff.
Wow.
So in that story, I don't want to recount the whole story, but basically Gilgamesh and Enkidu, who's his wild man, companion, friend. It's a long story. Basically,
it's epic.
Yeah, Gilgamesh was being a jerk, and the gods sent him Enkidu to kind of blow off steam and like chill him out a bit, and they went on all these adventures and stuff. And one of those adventures was they had to fight the bull of heaven, which was this giant bull causing chaos and destruction and stuff.
Wow.
As supernatural entities tend to do in these type of stories. So what they did was they danced in front of it, they distracted it with bright weapons and their tunics, and then they killed it. And it's all very indicative of bullfighting.
Wow. It really does. That resonates a lot with what we would picture bullfighting to be now.
I don't know if there's any connection, but it's an interesting comparison.
Yeah.
Before we go on, continue. And Enkidu actually got killed by the bull.
Really?
Yeah, and Gilgamesh there's two versions. There's the older version where Gilgamesh was so upset about this that he began a quest for immortality. and the newer version, which he began a quest to bring his friend back. It's a little more sympathetic.
Wow.
A lot of old stories don't really have likable protagonists.
Wow.
Or at least what we would call likable.
Wow, that's really something.
Yeah.
I'm really unfamiliar with the story, how that goes.
It's an interesting story.
That is interesting.
Yeah. There's reference in a Star Trek episode once. Anyways, moving on. Ancient Iran, there was bullfighting, but that was more of a religious function, like a ritualistic thing, than it was a sport or what we would call sports. Okay. It also happened in Rome as like part of their gladiator games.
In the Colosseum.
Yeah, though that was less focused on bullfighting as we would understand it, and more just wild animals and other gladiators going at it, know, type of a thing. Yeah. It was more of one of the animals they would let loose into the Colosseums along with lions and alligators or whatever. Wow, I don't know. Just wild, dangerous animals that they would starve, and they would, because then they'd be aggressive if they're starved.
Right.
So there's that. Not exactly the same, but it's kind of like
related. You
could arguably consider that like a predecessor, maybe. In medieval Spain, but by the way, medieval Spain has an interesting history because unlike Greece or Italy, Spain doesn't really have its own, well, I don't know. I don't want to say anything too ignorant. They got occupied and invaded a lot of times during like medieval times and during like kind of Greco-Roman times. And that ended up influencing their culture. Like the Moors were there for a while and stuff. So that's why if you look at mythology, like famous mythologies, you're like, oh, the Greeks have Zeus and Poseidon, and the Romans had Jupiter and Saturn, which are kind of like the same thing as the Greeks, but don't worry about it. And like up in Scandinavia, they had Odin and Thor and Freya and all that. Spain doesn't really have that. There isn't really any iconic, at least that I'm aware of. Yeah.
That sort of thing. Yeah.
Their mythology is more like, I think there's like stories about dragons or whatever, but it isn't like, I don't know. It's just an interesting kind of cultural thing.
That is really interesting. I never thought about that before, but yeah, you're right.
So medieval Spain, bullfighting is a thing, obviously, but it was more of a high society, rich person thing than like the masses. I'm sure there was probably public events like that, but it was considered more of a like, this is what rich people do in their free time,
to be entertained. And I could actually see why that might be because, well, you've got the money to go see it, but also you have the time. Like poor people in medieval wherever were probably just busy trying to feed themselves and keep track of their land and
their farm
pay
and stuff,
the kings or whatever. So there wasn't really leisure time.
No.
I'm assuming
it was a rough period of history.
Yeah. So like they didn't expect to seek out entertainment.
Yeah. The bullfighter would be on a horse with a lance, which I think is still in some versions done today. Usually in Spanish style, it's the bullfighter is on the ground, like on, not on a horse or mount, is what I mean. It was said that Charlemagne was a fan of these fights. I don't know if you know too much about Charlemagne. He's was a very influential ruler at the time. Basically, what makes him very significant to history is he had a lot of kids, both legitimate and illegitimate. And a lot of the European royal families and stuff can trace their ancestry back to Charlemagne.
That is really interesting. I think I'd heard that somewhere now that you say it.
Yeah, and so can Christopher Lee. So that's fun too. Yeah, he had
he's practically royalty, right?
Yeah. He had a I say had because he's unfortunately passed now, but he had a map, like a direct line to Charlemagne on like just kind of like this person is technically related by blood to like this person who's married this, tangled web of family trees.
Yeah.
So that's fun. That's interesting. There's also a lot of other rulers who enjoyed bullfights at time, but they're kind of less known nowadays. Like, who really has heard about Alfonso the Wise?
Alfonso the Wise.
I haven't.
Not me.
No, I didn't think so.
Was he a Spanish king? Do you know? It's okay if you don't know. A name like Alfonso could be Spanish, but it could also be something else.
Yeah, I don't know. Something like that. Around that area, probably. Okay. I don't think they traveled too much.
But he was wise and he liked bullfights. So.
Yeah, well, he was called wise. I don't know. Like there was what was the name? Robert, Edward? I don't know. There was one British monarch that was like the Yun, and the reason he was called that is because he was the son of his dad who had the same name, but he himself wasn't actually Yun, so it's like sometimes it's a bit confusing. So moving ahead a bit to 1726, Francisco Romero, I think that's how you say his name, he's commonly credited as being the one to introduce the whole bullfighting while on foot concept
in the 1700s.
Yeah, I think he might have also introduced the cape thing, but don't quote me on that.
Okay.
I was having trouble
pinning that down.
Yeah, like finding a good source on that, but that's like a thing that's said. However, Juan Belmont, he's usually credited as the inventor of modern style bullfighting. He was, and I think still is, considered like the greatest matador of all time.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And was he also in the 1700s?
No. He was in like the late early 1900s.
Wow.
So what he did was, we'll talk more about him later, but what he did was he stayed within a few centimeters of the bull, and it was very theatrical and stuff. And
so he put on a good show.
Yeah, the crowd loved it, and it was
imminent danger.
Very influential. The style stuck. And it's like anything, when something really popular comes along, everyone's like, oh, I want to do that. I want to piggyback off that.
That makes sense. Yeah. If people liked it, then other bullfighters will mimic it.
Yeah.
It makes me think really quick, just connecting in my head with, the excitement that people go to bullfights to see the excitement. I mean, there's a chance that bullfighter could die,
that's part of the excitement.
Yeah, I know. And that's sort of a weird thing about who we are as people, but it made me think connection to like Cirque du Soleil, the circus performers that, they fly around really high. And of course they take precautions and safety, but still the acts are dangerous, and that's like where the thrill and the excitement comes in. And it's just an interesting side note.
I hear what you're saying. I agree. I think it's kind of like saying that you go to bullfights for the sport, and it's kind of like saying you watch racing for the cars. Like, sure, you do. Wink,
like instead of like the thrill of the possible danger,
the possibility
of
which I think is, not to speak ill of anyone who's into that stuff, because obviously if you're into it, but
it's like that.
Yeah, I think there is a level of that, even if it's subconscious, of just like that's where the thrill comes from.
Right. It's like that facing death and conquering it, like
or at least
anything,
this time,
like skateboarding or anything that's thrilling like that, where there's always this possibility.
I would have immediately thought skateboard, but we can go with that.
I wasn't just thinking skateboarding like from your house to the store. So I'm thinking about some of the skateboard competitions.
Like Tony Hawk or someone.
Yeah, where they do tricks and get lots. Yeah.
So torero, is that how you say it?
Pretty close. I would say torero.
Torero?
Torero. I don't know how to say that really in English. Torero.
Torero.
Okay.
I'm just going to call it torero.
Okay.
I'm sure that's wrong. Whatever.
It's fine.
It's a type of bullfighter, basically. Okay. It's like kind of the typical archetypal bullfighter.
Okay.
They're athletes, and in terms of like agility and coordination and stuff, but they're also can be considered artists because of presentation and the theatrics and all that. They're like, back in the day, and maybe still, because bullfighting's still popular in Spain, they're like rock stars, basically. They're like, oh, it's so-and-so, and he's like...
kind of household names. They get a name for themselves. And
yeah, kind of like during the Age of Sail, pirates were. It's just like, oh, this person is really interesting and noteworthy and stuff. Though one can make the argument that bullfighters are a little more moral on average than pirates.
Yeah, because there's nothing necessarily immoral.
Well, we're going to get to the
But if you compare somebody who fights an animal to somebody who raids it and steals and kills, that's...
I agree. I would agree with that, but I'm just thinking about comments. But yeah, they'd get money and fame and stuff, and who doesn't want money and fame, or at least money, especially if they're good at it, because if they're good at it, then it's like even better.
Yeah.
It's like, I could make a wrestling comparison, but I don't know enough about wrestling to really talk about that. So moving on. By the way, matador is like the highest level of that.
Oh, that's interesting.
Torero.
Yeah, I didn't realize that was actually one of the questions I was thinking about was if a matador, and for some reason that's easy to say in English.
Yeah.
Is,
I don't know. It's just a weird language. It's weird.
Is the same as a torero, or if they're different. And so you just answered that. So, okay, that's good. So matador is like really good.
Yeah, they're like the
different level.
The best.
Okay.
It's still pretty dangerous though, obviously, because it's a wild animal.
Yeah.
With horns.
Unpredictable.
Massive. We own cows, and I'm just picturing them with horns and temperamental, and I'm just, they're big. Since 1700, there have been approximately 533 deaths in the arena, at least in professional bullfighting.
Wow, that seems huge.
Yeah, so quite a bit. I mean, I guess it's hard to put that into context because of since 1700, that's like
300 years.
300 years. It's enough.
If you think about professional, NFL players,
yeah,
it's like, okay, well, maybe some have died playing the game. I don't really know.
Yeah, I'm sure some
and it hasn't
have.
been around as many years, but it's nowhere close. I can't imagine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the threat is real. The excitement is real.
Absolutely. There's a couple other types of bullfighters, quote unquote. Sometimes they're not really. Oftentimes they're really find the bull, but they have a role, like there's the alguacilio. Is that how you say that?
Yeah, that was what we tried to practice ahead of time. That was hard.
But basically they're a horse rider. Then in the parade before the fight, they kind of lead the procession around. There's also a picador or a picador.
Yeah,
I
good.
guess.
Yeah,
there we go. And these guys, they're also on horseback. They ride around the bull and they zab it with lances. There's a couple of reasons why I do this. It's not just animal cruelty, though it could probably be considered animal cruelty. We'll get into that later. It keeps the animal enraged and angry, so it doesn't lose interest, and it also weakens it. Like it kind of realigns the animal, if you will, to kind of in the role it's supposed to be. Toro on horseback is called a rejonador. I don't know.
I've never heard that word before. So what do they do?
Oh, basically they're a toro, but on horseback.
Okay.
Like they're like the ones that
they actually fight the bull on horseback.
You mounted instead of on the ground.
Oh, okay.
It's just a difference in like
different
styles and how you go about it.
Okay. There's had to be some brave horses, huh?
Oh yeah. Well-trained horses.
Yeah.
Probably. The outfits they wear, I want to briefly touch upon them because they're really interesting. You can find pictures on them online if you're curious, but they look really fancy and strange and old. And they're called, the name translates to suit of lights.
And in Spanish, it's traje de luces.
Thank you. Yeah, I have that written down. I'm like, I don't know how to say this. It's very complicated. There's a lot of different Spanish terms to describe the different like sasses and like pins and stuff on it, and I didn't want to just make a giant list, so I didn't include that. But
it's really ornate, right? And colorful.
It's very ceremonial.
That's a good word. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And isn't there something to do with like getting dressed for the bullfighter is like a whole, what's the word I'm thinking of? Ritual. I think that there's sort of a ritual behind them getting dressed and preparing for the bullfight. Honestly,
it wouldn't surprise me given how crazy the outfits are.
Yeah.
I mean crazy in like a good way, like a fashionable way, not like that's whack, yo. So before we go into some famous bullfighters, because I want to talk about them as well, you mentioned you had a bit of a surprise for us.
I do. I would like to play. I found a bit of a sound bite of what it sounds like at an actual bullfight.
Yeah.
I believe this one's in Spain.
Sure. And is this the Paso Doble?
Yeah. So bullfights typically start with a paso doble,
which is a double step in English.
Yeah, and so it's good job, Jacob. So I don't know that if they always sound the same at the beginning of a bullfight, but you'll hear it here. You'll also hear some just like sounds of the crowd a little bit, and it's about 28 seconds.
Sure.
You'll hear some of the crowd saying "Ole."
Let me set the stage first before I listen to it, just real quick. So this is a military march that it inspired a highly influential genre of music in Spain, and this type of music is often played during bullfights. Like if you've ever seen an old movie or a video of it, this is a type of soundtrack they have going on.
I love that. Yeah, awesome. Thanks for adding that. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the button.
Yeah. Isn't that exciting?
It was. I know. It makes me get really excited when I hear that. It's very energizing kind of music. And I guess, you could hear the crowd cheering. I couldn't really quite make out the oles, but I think it was a different one I was listening to.
Yeah, it's all good.
But yes, that would have been when the procession was entering the ring, I think, or when the bull was entering the ring. I'm not sure.
I can't quite remember. It's a climatic swelling moment.
Yeah.
It's an entrance.
Yeah.
I love listening to music that's very involved with culture, especially culture that I'm not a part of.
Yeah, I love it too.
Just because it's interesting,
Yeah.
and it usually sounds pretty good. Like say what you will about bullfights, that music sounds pretty good.
Yeah,
I think we can all agree on that. I want to talk a little bit about a couple famous bullfighters.
Yes, sir.
So Juan Belmont.
Right. You mentioned him before, and I was,
Yes.
I get the Juan part because that's very Spanish.
Yes.
But the Belmont part doesn't seem like a typical Spanish name to me.
It sounds more French than anything.
Yeah, it's really interesting that he's.
I
Yeah.
believe that's how you say it. It's Belmonte.
Oh, with the E at the end does make it sound kind of French. But yeah, interesting. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just like a side note that didn't sound very Spanish.
Sure. Yeah. I think I misspoke earlier, and I want to apologize. Printer retraction. He was born 1892, so he was only barely in the 1800s.
Okay.
Well,
you barely misspoke then.
Yeah. We'll let it slide.
We'll let it slide this time.
Specifically April 14th.
1892. Okay.
Yeah. He's originally from Seville. Juan, I keep wanting to say John.
Yeah.
Juan, he had a record number of fights in the arena. And as we kind of talked about before, he greatly influenced the sport and how it was done. Like there's a lot of, I don't know if imitators is the right word, but a lot of people took after him.
Mm-hmm.
His unique style, which the kid was very close to the bull. Part of that was, I say part of it, I think a lot of it was he had some bad legs, like some minor deformities, and that kind of ended up influencing his style and conduct in the arena.
Oh, that's really cool, actually. If he had deformities that became a signature style that people copied, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, it's I love that because you see that sometimes with actors where like they have something that normally would be a disadvantage, but they make it work, and it's awesome. Like Peter Dinklage is like that,
I don't know who that is.
He's a is little person the correct term, or is it dwarf?
Oh, probably.
Yeah.
Oh, is he like the most famous one
He's
that
like
I've seen everywhere?
Yeah. He was in Elf. He was in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
In that
I
one
forget
movie
his name,
you saw that I don't remember the name of. In any case, and Dante Bosco as well, whose voice has been unchanged since puberty, but he's a great voice actor.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
So they use it to their advantage.
Yeah,
which is awesome.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that stuff. However, this close encounter style of bullfighting, it led to a lot of injuries. He got gored multiple times, which
sounds like a horrible way.
Makes sense.
So he gored and survived, obviously, since there were multiple of them.
Yeah, no, he didn't die in the arena.
Okay.
Obviously, earlier bullfighters would try to keep their distance for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But he was like, no, screw that. I'll get right up to it. He was very young when he began. He first began bullfighting in 1908. And by 1910, he'd killed his first bull.
Wow. So he was only 18 or so.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. He also had a rivalry with Jose Gomez Ortega.
Okay.
Which is an awesome name.
Yeah.
Who's also was pretty famous in his time.
That would make sense why they would be rivals, like the top guys.
Yeah, I think it might have been more of a friendly rival than
yeah.
Damn you, Ortega. I don't think it was anything like that. But that rivalry lasted from 1914 to 1920. It was called like the golden age of bullfighting because it was really hot at the moment and a lot of, talk of the town, and these guys were really good at what they did. And, a lot of people were into it. It was a golden years.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. They're kind of at the forefront of the industry, if industry is the right word for that.
Yeah. It's a tough one, but we'll go with industry.
Sure. Ortega got fatally gored, which kind of ended that whole...
In 1920, he was fatally gored during a bullfight.
Yeah.
Not while he was
practicing. Just randomly. No, yeah, it was during a bullfight. Yeah.
Well, I just wonder, they must practice with real bulls.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't know if it was like while.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah, but gosh, that's not how you'd really like to win a rivalry, probably.
No, probably not. And I don't think Belmont wanted that either because he retired not long after. For the first time, he retired. He ended up retiring 3 times throughout his career.
That sounds like some football players I've heard.
Yeah, he kept keep trying to get out and keep pulling back in. I don't know. Maybe he just loved it.
Yeah.
The last time he retired was in 1935, which was when he got into the bull breeding business. He kind of owned like a ranch or farm or whatever the Spanish
Probably a smarter
term
way to
is
go.
then.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was close friends with Ernest Hemingway, who we've also talked about on the show. He actually showed up in Hemingway's book about bullfighting.
Oh, that's
I can't
fascinating.
remember. Title.
What a neat coincidence.
Yeah.
There's a connection to a previous episode.
Yeah. Because Hemingway loved bullfights. He was so enthralled with that. And this guy was like the Michael Jordan of bullfighters.
Yeah,
so
that's cool.
What is interesting, and this is a little morbid, both Hemingway and Juan Belmont committed suicide with a gun. Like they died the same way.
Wow. Now I knew that about Hemingway because we talked about that, but wow.
Yeah, that's
really crazy that somebody who spent their life, risking their life, that was his chosen profession, then to pull out of the ring to, what would seem like a more subdued existence to then kill himself.
I don't know the reasoning. I don't know if anyone really does. He just had some issues, I suppose.
Do you have any idea what year that was?
That was 62.
Oh, wow. So he was a bit older by then. I mean, he wasn't an old man, but, and do you remember what year it was that Hemingway committed suicide?
Oh, geez, I don't.
I don't remember either. That would be interesting though.
Yeah, I think it was either around that time or before that time.
Okay.
But I could be wrong. Maybe it was later. I don't know.
Okay.
It's been a while since we recorded that.
Yeah.
But he was interesting. I thought, oh, that's cool because I didn't know about this guy. So I'm like, sure. Going a little farther back to like medieval Spain, El Cid, who is pretty famous. I'm not sure when he was born. It was around 1043 to 1048, around that time.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
Can you imagine leaving a legacy where people 1,000 years from now are talking or know who you were?
I think that's a dream, honestly. Like you're either really good or really bad at that point.
Yeah.
I heard a lot about him before we began to research him, but it was more just kind of vague whispers and snippets, like, oh, I've heard that name before type of a thing. Basically, he was a warlord, knight guy. He lived in medieval Spain, obviously, given when he was alive. And there's a lot of talk about him. Can maybe make its own episode potentially. Regardless, he is said to have been like the greatest bullfighter at the time. And of course, bullfighting then is not what it is now, but I thought, oh, that's cool. I didn't know he was involved with that. I guess it makes sense given he's Spanish and all that.
Yeah. Really something.
And he died 1099, so he lived a good couple decades. Yeah,
that would be interesting to do an episode of him. He's somebody I'd like to know more about.
Sure, yeah.
Cool.
Myself included. I'd also like to know more about that. Sometimes, because I can't remember if this was recorded or not. I don't think it was. We've been talking about this subject kind of on and off and like in our free time. And you mentioned to me that the meat of the bull would be given to the poor afterwards. Because
we were having some conversations about this. And that's one thing that I heard is that when a bull is killed in a bullfight, the meat is distributed to, among the poor people so that they can eat. And I didn't know if that was true or, it seemed like it was put out there as in, don't feel too badly for the bull because the meat is going to a good cause kind of thing. So, I didn't know. I just don't know.
I didn't know if it was true or not either. So I looked it up.
Yeah. Did you find anything out about that?
I did. Sometimes it's given to the poor, but it isn't always given to the poor. Like either if the bull survives, it is like kind of, put back into the, the pasture or whatever. They'll use it for breeding or whatever. Yeah. And if it's dead, then they'll use it for meat, but that doesn't automatically go to like poor citizens.
It doesn't necessarily get distributed to the poor people.
Yeah. In Spain, you can actually buy bull meat that was bulls that were killed in bullfighting. You can buy them at certain restaurants and from certain butchers, specialist stuff.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Yeah, so you could probably charge more for, a famous bull, I'm sure. Wow. Probably. That is really interesting.
Yeah. Huh. So we've kind of been dancing around this topic a little bit.
Ethics.
Yeah. No, it's just, there's a lot of ethical concerns about it, obviously. It basically comes down to the question of, does this count as animal cruelty or not? And I don't know where you stand on it, which is fine. I don't know where I stand on it necessarily either. A lot of countries have banned bullfighting or banned specific types of bullfighting. And again, we talked about this earlier. In America, you can't kill the bull. I think it's also the same way in Canada too. Like they're technically legal, but it's not, you can't kill it. Even in Spain, it's controversial. There are some areas of Spain where it's not allowed.
Yeah.
And there are others where it's like protected cultural heritage stuff. I don't know what the right word is.
I remember so many years ago when I was there, knowing then that it was a controversial thing in Spain. I was surprised sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're good.
When I went to Spain, like I said, it was decades ago.
Sure.
I was really looking forward to seeing a bullfight because I'd heard about bullfights, and the Spanish culture and everything just being just part of my growing up.
Sure,
a little bit. And so I was excited to see one. And then when I was there and, I enjoyed the experience a lot, but I was a little mortified at what they put the bull through. And I felt like it was kind of an unfair fight, although the bull is, what is he, a couple thousand pounds? I don't know. And the massive horns. And
a little out of the weight class.
Yeah,
of your typical
I felt like
bullfighter.
it wasn't just the bullfighter and the bull. It was the bullfighter and his
posse.
Exactly. Kind of picking at the bull, poking him, stabbing him, making him mad. And so honestly, I'm really not sure where I stand on the ethical thing, because I also am somebody who likes tradition, but I don't think I'd really like to sit through another one either.
Sure.
But then again, I don't like to watch boxing matches either.
And that's a lot less bloody.
Completely ethical, because both people can choose whether or not to be it. But
They're
I think
both consenting. Yeah.
It's a highly unnecessary to beat people to a pulp and maybe make them pass out and kill them. I think it's completely barbaric. And I don't like that either. So
sure. Well, it's a tricky thing. I was researching this topic. I was looking at videos of bullfights because I'm curious, what is this? And I scroll down to first of all, I noticed on YouTube, there's a like dislike bar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of dislikes.
Lots of dislikes. At least on the ones I looked at. I didn't look at all of them, of course, because I'm not crazy. I'm like, okay, I gotta say it, please. Yeah. And then I went down because that's not necessarily indicative of, because vocal minorities are a thing as well. So I went down to the comments, all negative. They're all rooting for the bull to kill the guy. They're all like, this is horrible. Why is this a thing? And I'm pretty sure a lot of the comments are not made by Spaniards, a lot of them were probably made by Americans or Brits or whatever. British. Sorry if that's offensive to British people. You saying Brits? I don't know. Yankees. And I thought, it's really interesting. I definitely get where they're coming from, because I think this is probably animal cruelty. I'm not an expert. I'm not someone who defines that stuff. Not up to me. But this seems like animal cruelty to me.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting though. Some of those comments though seem to be putting the life of the bull and the life of the bullfighter on the same plane, which I don't think that's the case.
Sure. No, I know. I think on both sides of the debate, there's a lot of emotion and a lot of, which what I mean by that is both sides say stupid stuff. And I think they say that because they're emotionally invested into rather not to keep or drop this thing. I understand why it's really important to Latin culture. I get it. If someone was, oh, geez, I'm trying to think of a good comparison. This is kind of hacky, the comparison, but in terms of problematic or arguably problematic cultural stuff, and I don't want to get into a big debate about this, but I see both sides of the gun control debate in America, where it's one side is there's a lot of gun violence and stuff. Maybe we should try to curb that a little bit. And the other side is well, no, I have a right to protect myself. And I've been handling guns since I was 10 and I've never had any problems. I get both sides of that, but I think there's still a compromise you could potentially reach if both sides are being rational, which they're not. And that's a problem. With bullfighting, with bullfighting, I don't know what a good compromise would be. And that's kind of frustrating because I'm well, either you keep it or you don't.
It is a little hard. I think, yeah, it's really tough. I think what's really cool about bullfighting is that it is something that goes back really so long, to the roots of society almost.
No, absolutely.
And that it reaches into present day. There aren't that many things I mean, I guess I could probably sit here and try to brainstorm some things that also, went way back then. I don't know. Okay, we have bars now. We used to have, bars back then or pubs
Probably,
or whatever,
yeah.
Inns. Okay, so that's something, but it's
I think
not.
prostitution's pretty old.
Oh, there
too.
you go. That's
I'm just thinking.
So there are some things, okay, but we do have laws about that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's just fascinating that it's like a piece of present day history that you can go watch history happening, kind of, is what it feels like.
No, I definitely get that.
But it's tough. It's definitely a tough ethical question.
Yeah. And I don't mean to, as much as we geek out over like the look and the music and kind of just the event itself, because it is pretty interesting. It is, I mean, I don't know if I'd call it fun, but it is like, I can see why people would have fun watching this or partaking in it or whatever. I definitely, there's like a not insignificant part of me that's like, I don't think this is okay. Like, I have issues with this, but at the same time, I'm American, I'm not Spanish, so it isn't really up to me, Yeah. Like it's, I don't know. It's a tricky thing, but it's also like, I don't want to be all imperialistic and say, well, it's my way or the highway, because life doesn't work like that.
Yeah. And if you ever get to go to Spain, then you just won't be one of the people that buys the ticket
I suppose
to go in.
Yeah.
That would be how you would express your sentiment, I guess.
I guess,
that.
yeah. I don't know. It's just, I thought any discussion about bullfighting would be incomplete without kind of talking about that. Not because
it's kind of an elephant in the room. Yeah, really.
Yeah, it is. And I'm not someone who's really into controversy. Mm-hmm. Some people are. They love that. They just look for controversy when there isn't controversy.
We need fewer of those people.
Yes, or at least we need them to be more quiet.
Yeah, there you go.
But the but I thought like, well, this is very relevant, and I will get rightfully yelled at if I don't mention this.
If we don't bring it up and discuss. Yeah. I agree. But yeah, one of my, the listeners are probably going to know now or knew already that, Spain and everything that's Spanish, I really adore. This is a really interesting topic. I'm glad you got to, shine some light on it a little bit. I learned a couple things myself.
Yeah, which I am surprised and happy for.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really great.
That's like you teaching me something about Star Wars, I feel like.
That's an impossibility. That will never happen. I was like, for a second, I was like, do I know something? No, I wouldn't even be able to approach that.
When the West meets the East, that
will never happen. Yeah. So very cool. Thank you. I enjoyed this one a lot. So what's coming up next time?
Yeah, next time. First, I hope our audience enjoyed it as well. Thank you for listening.
Yeah.
It means the world to me and to both of us, really. Next time, we're going to be talking about a person. He's probably one of my favorite actors, Vincent Price.
Oh, I think one Christmas you got a Vincent Price DVD that has some different movies. Oh, cool.
Had Fall, the House of Usher, and Pin in the Pendulum. Some Edgar Allan Poe, kind of slocky horror, but it was good. I liked them.
Kind of what?
Slocky horror.
I've never heard slocky before.
Oh, lowbrow, I guess.
Okay.
The right term for that. I can't wait to get into that. That'll be really fun because he's a fun person. But we'll dig into that next week.
I'm looking forward to learning more about him because I recognize his name and what he does, but that's about the limit. So cool. There's a lot to learn. Yeah.
Great.
All right. Well, listeners, thank you so much. Like Jacob said, we appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Confucius once said, "Study the past if you would define the future." You've been listening to the History Slices podcast with Jacob and Rachel. We hope you've gotten some useful information from the show. We hope we made you think, and we hope you were entertained. We know we had fun, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on Facebook at History Slices and on Instagram at History Slices Podcast. Make sure to like, rate, and review the show, and tell a friend about the show. That'll help us out too. One more quote before we go from Michael Crichton. If you don't know history, then you don't know anything. You are a leaf that doesn't know it's part of a tree. Till next time, this is History Slices, signing off.